Live from San Francisco on the Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, you are listening to Wrestling Observer Live.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Let's get it on!
How's it going, everybody? Andrew Zarian here, Wrestling Observer Live. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. East, and Sundays, 6 p.m. East, and I'm here on a Sunday. By the way, it's a pay-per-view Sunday, and I'm here. Brian took off today. He had some plans. He had stuff going on, but, you know, NXT counts. This counts as a pay-per-view night. It's NXT War Games. There should be a big deal. I think for some it is. I don't know about everybody else. We're going to talk about that, obviously. We're going to be here for the next hour discussing all things professional wrestling, including NXT War Games, which is coming up tonight. Big shout out to our friend, Denise Salcedo, on the pre-show tonight, causing a stir online. Always, Denise, causing problems. Denise is on the pre-show. That's going to begin in about an hour, I believe, here. SmackDown review, Rampage, TV ratings. I don't have Fast Nationals today. I think I've decided I'm retiring the Fast Nationals after my entire Twitter timeline exploded with people arguing with each other. Nobody's arguing with me. Everybody's arguing with each other. I don't know why. We're going to talk about that, obviously. SmackDown last night, on Friday night, I should say. Not a bad show. I thought the Brock Lesnar stuff was really cool. Rampage, great main event. I very much enjoyed the main event on Rampage. There's also a lot of moving parts here, right? Last week, we were talking about 2022 and what that means for pro wrestling. I think the story here is hopefully the first uninterrupted year when it comes to touring, when it comes to having a live audience. And I think that's where we're going to kind of get back into the fall of this, right? We're going to get back into how wrestling was for us, watching it regularly for all these years. This year was up in the air, man. And you know, we're reaching the end of the year, and I think we'll do like a little end of year review. My last Sunday on for 2021, and we'll take some phone calls from you guys, and we'll figure out, you know, what you guys liked and what we didn't like. I'm planning that, obviously, and then everything else we're doing with Matt Man. But when we get back, we're going to go into the nitty-gritty here. NXT War Games in a couple hours. So we're going to talk about that. Andrew Zarian, Wrestling Observer Live. We'll be right back after this.
Alicia Atut Q&A Part 3. Question number 9. What's the most used app on your phone?
Instagram, which is funny because I never even used technology prior to having this website or, you know, like doing what I do now. So it's definitely Instagram. I'm guilty of it.
I was going to say, you weren't a MySpace person?
No, actually, I never had MySpace, which is weird because I was such an emo kid growing up. So you would think I would 100% have been on MySpace, but I just I didn't even have Facebook when I was a teenager. I didn't have socials until I was 18 because I just didn't care. I would call people, you know, very old school.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. Question number 10, last question. Name 3 people who inspire you the most.
Oh, okay. I'm going to wrap them all into one, and I'm going to put my sister, mom, and dad, because my dad, he's the reason I love wrestling and music the way I do. My mom is one of the strongest humans I've ever met, and my sister is just, she's amazing. She's a nurse, and just knowing what she's going through, especially now, she's just so brave, and I adore them so much. So I'd have to go with my family, wrapped into one for one of them. Then I would have to go with, again, I'm so sorry to mention him again, but I have to say Paul Stanley, just because he went through so much. He had a deformity with his ear growing up, and then he ended up playing one of the best biggest bands in the world, like just seeing what they went through and people still giving them slack to this day, but they're icons, would have to go with him. And then my third biggest inspiration, there's a band called Noah and the Whale, and they're very, very indie. They're from the UK, but they're one of my favorite bands of all time. And their lyricist, Charlie, has some of the most gorgeous lyrics I've ever read, and they were just very uplifting in some harder times in my life. So it'd be a mix between him and Burt McCracken from The Used, who's another band I love. They have lyrics that just lift you up when you feel like everything's wrong, and sometimes you just need that. So yeah, I gave you what, 3, 4, 5, 6, I doubled them, but whatever.
All of them, man. Like, there's so much inspiration out there. I totally get it. I love this. BTW, I'm like, I've only talked to you for like 20 something minutes, and I've already learned so much about like all of like these like musicians. And I'm like, hell yeah, like I'm already getting all this information. This is great. And before we wrap this video up, friendly reminder to head on over to Instagram and give us a follow at WONF4W and get caught up with all of the
Andrew Zarian here, Wrestling Observer Live, Sunday edition, Wrestling Observer Live, pay-per-view edition of Wrestling Observer Live. NXT War Games, not NXT TakeOver War Games. This was an interesting topic of discussion for a lot of people. When it came to the War Games title, and the TakeOver title, I should say, initially people were concerned if they were going to call these specials, right? Network specials or pay-per-views, whatever you want to call them. They were going to call them War Games and a TakeOver. I got War Games on my mind. I keep reading it here. And unfortunately for a lot of people, unfortunately for NXT, they're not calling it TakeOvers anymore. And when I asked about this, I got 2 different answers. First time I asked, I was told, well, no, but it's not that it's a dead name. The TakeOver name's not dead. We're just not going to use it. I was like, okay, whatever. I guess they left the door open to use that TakeOver title again, which is fine. But then I was told that if or when they ever do large arenas again, maybe they'll call it a TakeOver when it's piggybacked with a WWE pay-per-view, which I'm not against that. If they get back to that point, which I don't think they are at that point right now, and with all the people possibly leaving, I don't know if they're going to get to that point for a while. But we're going to talk about this. I want to break down this card here. It starts at 8 p.m. East on Peacock, NXT War Games. Interesting. Just the buzz has dwindled, right? And that's been the big story of NXT. And that's not that the ratings are doing terrible, which they're not. The ratings are doing pretty decent. 637,000 viewers on Tuesday night for NXT. On a go-home show, which is fine. They've been sitting in that 600 range for a while, and it's not that far off from what they were doing when they had this NXT, I guess, 1.0, you're going to call it, whatever you want to call it. When they had, everybody on that roster, they were doing it in the 7s, maybe 8s. Now they're doing the 6s. Not that bad. To defend them a little bit, for unknown talent to most people. Women's War Games match. Raquel Gonzalez, Io Shirai, Cora Jade, Kaylee Ray versus Dakota Kai and Toxic Attraction. Toxic Attraction has been a big part of NXT right now since they rebranded. They've been a big part of that story. They're like the stars of the show at this point. We also got a hair versus hair match. Duke Hudson and Cameron Grimes. I'm hoping they don't shave Grimes' head here. Might be time for him. Tag team title match, NXT champions, Imperium, facing Kyle O'Reilly and Von Wagner. Now, Kyle O'Reilly's contract is ending. So is Johnny Gargano's, which we're going to talk about. We talked about the tag title match. NXT Cruiserweight Championship, Roderick Strong versus Joe Gacy. A lot of speculation whether or not this Cruiserweight title's over. The Cruiserweight Championship is going to get retired. Maybe they call it something else. Maybe they just get rid of it totally. 205 Live has not been a topic of discussion for anybody. That's been covering wrestling. Nobody's really looking at 205 Live. And you know what? I got to tell you, was the Enzo era of 205 Live that bad? No. It's actually unbelievable. He was really they had added some pretty cool stuff to that. I can't believe I'm saying how I want Enzo back, but I think having 205 Live and what they were doing early on compared to now is a whole night and day situation. It's a forgotten show. It's a forgotten title. Nobody really talks about it. And then we got the NXT men's War Games match. We got Team Black and Gold, Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, Pete Dunne, LA Knight versus Team 2.0. Now, this has to be the Braun Breaker story here. Everything leading up to this is a Braun Breaker moment. LA Knight being on that Team Black and Gold is interesting, but I guess they needed to put someone that's maybe a veteran. Maybe that's how they were looking at it, because the other side is all very new, fresh. I think Braun's had about 14 matches televised. Not many. So this is it. I mean, this is going to be a great test for these guys to see if it's possible for them to do it. You got a tremendous group of guys for you to work with. And if Braun is going to be that guy, honestly though, if Braun is going to be that guy, he has to have a great showing here. He's in the ring with Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, Pete Dunne. These are your opponents, and they are there to make the younger guys look like $1 million. And I think they're going to do that. I have decent expectations from that match, especially the show. I don't think the show's going to be a dud whatsoever. If you were to ask me, should I watch it? I'm going to tell you, go watch it. If you have nothing going on tonight, you don't have a kid's birthday party, you're not taking your kids to the movies, I think you should watch it. I think it's a fun show to watch. And by the way, we're going to go into, when we have our guest on the next segment, I'm going to bring him on. I like to keep these guests a surprise for everybody. But when my guest is on, we're going to go into this a little bit more. And I actually want to go more into what's been going on the mainstream products, like SmackDown, actually. SmackDown last night, we saw Brock Lesnar return. Right? We saw him have a segment with Sami Zayn. You maybe set up a match there for something. You set up the day one pay-per-view between Lesnar and Roman Reigns. A lot of people surprised by that, by the way. The speculation was that they were going to do it at Royal Rumble or even WrestleMania. But now you're doing it at day one. I know that there's a lot of emphasis on this. I'm talking to people within WWE and talking to people that are maybe a little bit in the know. Ton of emphasis on what's going on. So we'll see. We'll figure it out. So we had that. We also had a terrible segment with Happy Talk on that show. I was not a fan of. I don't know, man. Can you guys do those talking segments like that? That's the thing about SmackDown. It's really not like Raw whatsoever. Like, I don't feel like I'm watching Raw when I watch SmackDown. It's a very different show. I watched that show in its entirety on Monday, considering it was in my backyard in Long Island, 7 minutes from my house, that show on Monday Night Raw at UBS Arena. And just from the opening moment to the end of the show, I am watching a variety hour presentation. I'm watching, and I'm not saying this in a bad, I'm watching the Muppets, Vince's Muppet Show. It's so beyond over the top. And we're talking about wrestling. We're talking about professional wrestling. How could it be that over the top that I'm watching professional wrestling and I'm saying this is too over the top? I don't know. I don't enjoy it as much. I mean, listen, there's tons of elements in that show that are fantastic. There's tons of talent that's fantastic. Great matches every couple of weeks. That show was a hot card. Look at all the things that you saw on Monday. You saw Vince was there. You had Roman, by the way, did a dark match, but that's besides the point, right? That was for ticket sales. But you had a stacked card with match after match that could be pay-per-view level matches. Kevin Owens and Big E, that's a pay-per-view caliber match. Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, that's a pay-per-view caliber match. And they put it on TV, and they had good matches. But it meant nothing at the end of the day. And that is the problem with that show, is that it means nothing. How do you convince people to come back when at the end of the day, You know, it doesn't matter what they do. I'm not going to see anything important. I'm not going to see anything big. I'm not going to see anything that out of the norm. I'm just going to watch the show. And that's why you're at the numbers you're at. 1.6 something? 1.67 million for Raw? Not great. By the way, SmackDown Fashion Nationals, I lied to you. 1.9 million. I think 1.99 million. 1.96 million. And 483 for Rampage. We're sitting in this 483, 500 range. We'll be there for a while. These are Fast Nationals, by the way. Nothing final. I do want to bring up an interesting thing when we come back from the break and when with our guests, because, you know, we're talking about numbers a lot. I love these things. I know it bores a lot of people. But interesting NHL numbers on TNT. And very interesting how much they're paying them. We'll be back right after this. Andrew Zarian, Wrestling Observer Live.
Q&A with Ruby Soho, part 3. Question number 9. If you can become an expert in something by tomorrow, what would it be?
Oh,
Like magically, you'd become an expert.
Magically. Expert. Done. I think the first...
Wrestling Observer Live. Andrew Zarian here with my guest on the line here on the Sunday. One of my friends. I consider him a really good friend, especially in the world of professional wrestling coverage. From Top Rope Nation, Ryan Drosty. What's going on, Ryan?
Andrew, thank you for the invite, man. It's been
Dude,
too long.
Of course, man. Very excited to have you on here with me. Your first time here on Observer Live, I believe, right?
Yeah. I've been on Mad Men a few times. You've been on Top Rope Nation, but never hear the Wrestling Observer live, man. I mean, the big time.
Big
I was
time.
pretty
Big
excited
time.
when I got
Listen,
the
this is
invite
it.
here. I mean, you're
National
doing big
radio.
things, man.
National
Yeah,
radio.
yeah.
Listen, I'm just here for the ride. That's what I keep telling people. I'm here until everybody's sick of me, and then I'll disappear, and nobody will hear from me ever again.
Dude, it was so great to meet up with you in Chicago. All out weekend, long time coming. And I mean, I consider my podcast kind of part of the Mat Men tree. You know, we've been friends since, I don't know, 2015 or so.
Yeah.
And when I wanted to start my podcast in 2016, I was asking you questions. You know, I'd been listening to your show for a while, and it was, I mean, honestly, man, it was an inspiration to Top Rope Nation to start it. So I got to thank you too.
Yeah, man.
But, yeah, I mean, we're doing good stuff.
Yeah, I think, and here's the interesting thing, right? I got to fix this right now because apparently they can't hear you, but I can. And this is how we're going to fix it here because we're constant professionals when we're doing this. Constant professionals. And now I believe everybody could hear you. Here we go. Everything is fine now.
All right.
Yeah. So this is what I want to talk to you about. NXT is happening tonight, NXT War Games. And I want to get your opinion on this because this is, you know, NXT War Games is their big pay-per-view. You know, that's their big moment. And year after year, it's been fantastic. What's your expectation this week?
I got to say my expectations are fairly low. I mean, I know it's the signature match in a lot of ways now for NXT, you know, and with the history of War Games and everything, everybody always looks forward to it. But with the reboot of NXT and everything here over the last couple of months, I mean, they're still trying to find their footing. I can't say I look forward to the shows in the same way that I did a couple of years ago. You know, there's stuff that they are doing that I look forward to. But as a whole, if you compare this to, you know, the takeover weekovers of years past, I mean, it's really no comparison at this point. You know, the company has completely kind of shifted their philosophy. I think they needed to shift their philosophy. So that was necessary, but they're still just trying to get the ground under them. And so, you know, we'll see how it goes tonight. I'm sure there's going to be good in-ring action. You know, they've got Braun Breaker, obviously looking to, he would be my pick to be the survivor on his team of the War Games. He's kind of the hot new thing coming up. And for me, the reason to tune into NXT right now. I like what Mandy Rose is doing with her group and everything, but you know, it's not the same feel as it was before. I think I called in on a Mat Men NXT watch along about a year ago, and you know, I was a little more excited then than I am right now. But I mean, I'll still watch it, and I hope they live up to what we've gotten in the past. We'll see.
You know, here's where the shifting of philosophy came, right? The intention was never what we got. We ended up getting with NXT. I think it was a happy, I guess, mistake on their behalf. You know, the intention was never to become a Ring of Honor competitor or a AEW head-to-head on a Wednesday night competitor. The original concept was they needed to do something that wasn't OVW and it wasn't Deep South and it wasn't Florida. Mm-hmm. And this was their concept to train better and prepare people better. And that original NXT, you know, you look at that lineup, yeah, it was a mixed match of up-and-coming guys, some independent talent, some athletes, but the focus was never long-term, known commodities within pro wrestling holding those titles. The Shinsuke Nakamura's, the Finn Balor's, the Kevin Owens, those guys were never the intention for NXT. It happened because Triple H and many other people realized that they had something here that was really cool and really different and was providing a need. At the time, you remember, Ring of Honor did not look good at all on TV when NXT started. Same thing with Impact. Impact was, you know, the dying days of Impact. I keep saying there will be a nuclear explosion that goes off, and the only thing that survives is Impact at this point. It's unbelievable. But do you think that this shift now, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the buzz is not there online, right? We know this. Everybody knows this. However, their viewership has not dwindled.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Was it about 600,000 this week?
630 something? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's so many people that watch the WWE product out of routine, and I think a lot of those people have become NXT viewers now too. You know, they have that older audience, longtime fans of pro wrestling that are going to keep tuning in. They need that younger audience, you know, that AEW has appealed to. But I think you're right in that NXT was supposed to be the developmental brand, but it never really was a developmental brand. They kind of just had a parade of established independent stars coming through. They'd be there for a couple of years. They do have some awesome matches, and then they go on, and most of them not become main eventers on the main roster, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
the amount of guys that they had come through NXT that they developed from scratch is so low that yeah, this is what they need it to be, what they've switched it to now, you know, what they have in mind for stars moving forward. And, you know, they're starting to do that with the athletes that they're signing and everything. And yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I think it was a necessary change. I know it sucks because everybody looked forward to NXT the way it was before, but it really wasn't serving the purpose, as you said, Andrew, of what it needed to be.
Yeah, and what it needed to be is developing top level stars on the main roster. And you know, even with all the successes, right? I have this poster behind me for people who are watching. People who can't see, I'll explain it to you. But I have this poster from 2016. It's an NXT live event at the theater by the Garden, right? It's called the Big Apple Breakdown. It was a fantastic show. It was done next door to the Garden. It's Madison Square Garden Theater, the amphitheater. It had like a couple thousand people in there. Really cool show. But, I mean, the headline match, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, and Shinsuke Nakamura against, you know, Samoa Joe and The Revival. You know, you're looking at this. Out of all these people that have come through NXT that we loved, who has become the top star in WWE? None of them.
None of them, yeah.
Right? And that's, I mean, listen, I'm not counting Biggie and I'm not counting Seth Rollins. They were before the shift, obviously. They were, these guys were Florida guys that ended up, you know, going into NXT when they changed brands and they moved up very quickly. But I you know, from that group, from that, you know, the pop moment, you know, 2014 on, who's the guy that is their big star? You know what? They did not create a Roman Reigns, and that was the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was guys that you thought maybe had the potential when they brought them up, and then there was issues with the way that they introduced them to the main roster. I always thought with NXT, they kind of took for granted that the fans would know who the people were that they brought up. And they didn't do a lot in the way of video packages, hyping them up, you know, showing the backstory of what they did in NXT. And even before that, they would kind of just bring in guys and like assume that you knew who they were. And this goes back to when NXT was streaming on the network. You know, so we weren't getting those numbers of how many people were watching it, but you know, you got to assume it was similar to what was watching NXT in the Wednesday Night War era, maybe a little bit more, you know, without the head-to-head and everything, but not compared to Raw and SmackDown, not even remotely close to that many people, obviously. So when you transition those NXT guys up to Raw and SmackDown, it's like what is the percentage of this audience that actually is familiar with them? And it half, less than half. And I think that was a big problem and why a lot of these guys didn't catch on, and they didn't do enough to make you understand as a casual fan, you know, why they were a big deal. I think Kevin Owens probably had the best debut, and Finn Balor, you know, early on too. But neither of them became main eventers. You know, they had their championship reigns, but
for like a half a second, you know, you know what's crazy? You know who I think became a bigger star than a lot of those other names? Baron Corbin.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. Creatively. Yeah.
Creatively, yeah. I'm telling you, like, he's a staple in that company, and he came from NXT, and he was an NXT project.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's regardless of what you think about the storylines and everything, they've had a lot of focus on him with the storylines, and you know what he's done this year has been somewhat entertaining. So I mean, more entertaining than just going out and wrestling matches and nothing else going on. So
now we brought up all the men's side of NXT, right? The generational shift in NXT. However, I have to tell you, the women's side has been a total 180 of what they've done with the men, right? Think about all the stars. You know, that entire women's roster is NXT, has come through NXT, and they've been very successful with it. They created probably the biggest stars, you know, of the last 20, 30 years in pro wrestling when it comes to the women's side. Sasha, Bailey, Charlotte, Becky, and then Alexa. These are names that, and I have to tell you, like, I talk to a lot of people on the marketing side and on the merchandising side, and kids go crazy for them, right? Especially if you're, a 10-year-old. Like, my daughter loves Natty, loves Natalia. Yeah. And when I saw Natalia at the Garden for the show on September 10th that they had here in MSG, I went up to her and I was like, listen, I want to tell you, my daughter adores you. And she's like, why do you think it is? I go, the freaking cat ears. She connected with her and she wants to see her wrestle. And you know what? That's amazing, right? That's amazing for a kid that's getting into pro wrestling.
Yeah. I have similar with my daughters too. Yeah.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to go to a break. Second segment coming up with Ryan, Top Rope Nation, everybody. Go check it out. Wrestling Observer Live, Andrew Zarian.
Q&A with Ruby Soho, part 3. Question number 9. If you can become an expert in something by tomorrow, what would it be?
Oh,
like magically, you'd become an expert.
Magically. Expert. Done. I think the first thing that comes to mind is something that I'm working on that I'm hoping, at least hopefully by the end of the year, I will be able to do well. I'm working on learning sign language. So I would love to. It's very difficult. There's a lot more to it than because I knew a little bit when I was young, but like there's a lot more to it than I had ever realized. And, obviously, it's a new language. So I think if I could be it tomorrow and just be fluent in sign language, I would be a very happy girl.
That is so awesome. Question number 10, last question. What's the craziest thing you feel you've ever done?
The craziest thing I feel I've ever done. Oh, Lord. I don't know.
You're like, okay,
I guess this is kind of crazy. This is a really weird story, so I'll shorten it a little bit. But one time I went to jail for driving with a suspended license. I didn't know it was suspended. I had moved and I had insurance but just not in the state that I moved to. And I got, please provide proof of insurance within 30 days. And they sent it to my old address. So I never got it. And then it got suspended and I didn't know it. And so I got pulled over for something silly, probably like going a couple miles over, and they found out my license was suspended. So I went to jail. They take you to jail for that, by the way. I went to jail. And I was in Indiana in an area that apparently one of the deputies was a fan. I was on the Indies. I wasn't, assigned anywhere by that point. He was a fan. And while I was in the cell, he came into the cell and asked me for an autograph.
No.
So I signed an autograph in jail. So, yeah.
You're like, you're gonna help me out here.
Ridiculous. Yeah. So he was like, hey, at the time, he's like, Heidi Lovelace, how are you? And I was like, oh, a bit better. And yeah, he was like, oh, when's the next time I'm gonna see you in Indianapolis? I was like, it just kind of depends on how all this plays out. And he after that, he asked me for an autograph. I was like, okay, but can you get me out of here? No, all right, just see you later. It was crazy. So yeah, I guess that's the craziest thing.
It's like trippy because like one moment you're like having like the worst day of your life, and then the next it's like, well, okay, like I'll sign you this autograph.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It was
amazing.
A crazy thing. Yeah, I love that story. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A. Do not forget to check out my show, Speak Now Pro Wrestling, on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on the F4W Online YouTube channel and Twitch.
Andrew Zarian here, Wrestling Observer Live. Ryan, Top Rope Nation, joining me here. We were talking about NXT right before the break and how our what brings kids into this, who my kids love. And, you brought up, who did you say your daughter's into? You may be going to a show in Des Moines?
Yeah, loves Becky Lynch. Absolutely loves Becky Lynch. I mean, to your point, I have $3, but 2 of them are old enough to actually watch wrestling. And they're not really into any of the men on WWE, but they love the whole women's division. They like Natty, just like you said, Becky, of course, Charlotte, like the whole gang. When they watch AEW with me, they know all the men and like the men too. It's something I don't know why it is, but WWE, it's only the women's side.
My wife's
and
gotten
my
into
oldest
AEW.
daughter.
My wife got
Yeah.
into AEW, and I think she got she saw it. We went to that show in Chicago, and she fell in love with it. Now what I'm getting yelled at when it's on at like 1:30 in the morning when I get home. You know, so I work
Yeah,
late
you
some
guys were
nights.
sitting right behind us at the show.
We were,
and
yeah.
I could hear you like kind of explaining to her how it all works and stuff. and
I
she was
got to
asking
tell
good
you the story.
questions.
I can't say it on national radio, but I'll tell you the
Uh-oh.
story off the air about that night. It was fantastic. We all had a great time that night.
Yeah.
But so listen, I want to go into some other stuff because having you here and you're always a great mind about this stuff, and I love your podcast. By the way, I subscribe to your Patreon every month. You get a couple bucks from me. Top Rope Nation, you do a great show. I don't listen to as much podcasts as I used to because my travel's a little different, but it's my go-to, every chance I get. It's downloaded. I absolutely love it. I always recommend it to people. So if you're a pro wrestling fan, obviously you are if you listen to this and you listen to other podcasts, check out Ryan, Top Rope Nation. Let's go into some of the stuff that's been going on TV. SmackDown on Friday. I enjoyed SmackDown. It was not a bad show.
Yeah. I mean, good to see Brock back. Them building to, Brock, Roman, they've done it so many times before, but it's definitely the biggest match they can do right now. So I enjoyed seeing him around and stuff. And SmackDown's always just such an easy watch. 2 hours. Whenever I tune in, it's always at least enjoyable. I won't say it's like spectacular television, but I would much rather watch SmackDown than Raw right now. And yeah, I thought Fridays was good for what it was.
But you know what? Some weeks it is spectacular. Some weeks I watch that
Yeah,
show
it
and I'm
can
like,
be.
you know what? It depends on how you're watching, right? And it's the different stages of pro wrestling, I call it. You go from like, New Japan all the way to Monday Night Raw. It's all different. It's the spectrum of pro wrestling, which I enjoy all of it. Even when I don't enjoy it, I'm still watching and I'm enjoying most of the stuff. But, night and day with Monday Night Raw when you watch SmackDown.
Yeah.
It's a very different show. Very, very different
and-
show, and I say this all the time.
Yeah. And Andrew, what does that say though? What we were just talking about with NXT, that they've had this pipeline of talent now getting all this television time for years. And it comes back to Roman and Brock is the best, that's the top match they could do. They've already headlined WrestleMania twice, SummerSlam before.
Hey, look at the Raw side. They're going back to Edge and The Miz.
Yeah.
Maurice and Miz debuted on Raw. They came back. Maurice is back. And Edge, they confronted Edge in the ring. It was a good promo. Edge is fantastic. Listen, those acting classes that guy has taken over the last 10 years has paid off tremendously.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Tremendously. He is and it's like I get goosebumps sometimes when I think about this. Like wrestling, we all love it, right? That's why we're here. But you think about the moments that you've been kind of robbed with Edge that you did not get to see because his career was cut so early. These are some of those moments where you look at it and you're like, you know what? That really sucks. We didn't get to see him and Punk, for example, in a long feud, or him and Danielson in a long feud. But they are giving us The Miz. And this is probably leading to a mixed tag match between Miz and Maurice and Beth Phoenix and Edge.
Yeah.
This
absolutely.
is where it's headed. And you know what? I'm not against it. I kind of want to see it.
No, yeah. That would be pretty enjoyable. I'd look forward to that too. Yeah, it's good to see Edge too getting these moments in front of the fans again, because he made the comeback and then almost instantly right after that pandemic hits and he's
Drew.
wrestling they're wrestling
Drew.
in front of nobody, or he was injured for a while, but now at least he's out there. Always gets a huge pop from the crowd, understandably. But,
I was talking to somebody at over there, as they say, New York, and he brought up an interesting conspiracy theory to me. And I was like, okay, let me listen. He goes, this is my theory. He goes, there's nothing that tells me that this is true, but this is my theory. If the pandemic era of WWE never happened, we would have a very different Monday Night Raw. I was like, what do you mean by that? I was very curious. I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he goes, the show now is more closer to the Thunderdome era than it's closer to Drew kicking the hell out of Brock Lesnar out of that ring at that Royal Rumble. We have now, he goes, there is a definitive split on how that show is. And I thought
Mm.
about it. I go, you know what? He may have a point here, because with the Thunderdome era, we got to see the stage show that Monday Night Raw is always, Vince McMahon has always wanted. He controls the laughs. He controls the boos. It became, I mean, just a full-on production that they adapted to it took them a little bit in the beginning, but they adapted very nicely by the time they got to the Thunderdome as far as the best that they could do. And SmackDown is the compromise for us. Hey, you guys want wrestling? Here's our version of wrestling as SmackDown. And you know what? Roman Reigns being there, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And
due to the length of Raw too, I mean, it kind of has to be that way. 3 hours, you got to do non-wrestling stuff. I know everyone likes to time the wrestling that's on Raw and SmackDown every week and stuff, but Raw's, I mean, it's just not the type of company that's going to put 2 hours and 20 minutes of wrestling out there on a 3-hour broadcast. It's just never going to be that way. The way that they build up stars and really the way they've always done it. I mean, even in the Attitude Era, it was a lot of campy segments, a lot of in-ring promos and stuff. So it's always, Raw is always going to be more of a stage show than a wrestling show. I think the 3-hour length just really hammers that home, that they have to, that's how they're always going to produce that show no matter what. So
here's the other thing, right? Dynamite, on the other hand, is such a different freaking show.
Mm-hmm.
Watching it last week, it is a pro wrestling show, which I absolutely love. It's a fantastic show. I turned it on. The numbers were shocking to me. They were surprisingly low, considering that it was a really good show. It could be any. Listen, these numbers. I think we need to start focusing more in like those DVR +3. The 3-day DVR average numbers, rather than just the overnights, because people are not watching live as much as they're watching. They're not. And I tend to enjoy AEW more than I enjoy WWE's product when I'm watching it live. I have not watched a Dynamite in a very long time that I said, my God, this was terrible. This was a terrible Dynamite. I can't remember the last time I turned it off. It doesn't happen with Dynamite because I watched the whole thing because it's fresh, it's new, it's different. I can't predict how they're going to do it as much. And I think that plays a big part in this. And by the way, I think that plays a big part in the criticism of AEW. The fact that viewers cannot predict what's going to happen next. So they start speculating all these things in their head and they don't get it. Listen, I'm just throwing an idea out there. I'm not saying that's everybody here, right? But Dynamite was a fantastic show, but here is the difference. And I'm going to ask you this question because somebody said this to me in a tweet, and it got me thinking. Here's my question to you. You look at Roman Reigns and you say, my God, this guy's a big act. The way he comes down, what he does, how he does it. Is that guy missing for AEW? That the guy that you look at and you say, he's the man, he's the guy. Is that missing for them?
I think Kenny kind of had that aura about him a little bit, just the way that he would carry himself as champion, with him healing up now. Maybe a little bit, but again, it's the audience difference too, like you were saying. I don't know that people tune into WWE for the larger than life personalities, and I don't know that that's really why people are going to tune into AEW really at all.
Casual
ever.
fans, right? Because you're eventually going to want those. You're going to want those guys.
Yeah.
If you want to continue growing. There's only so much of us that absolutely to me it doesn't matter. I watch Kenny Omega and I understand how important this guy is to pro wrestling. Same thing with, Danielson being there, Punk being there. These are important figures in that company to bring those eyeballs. When you're going to have that match between Kenny, eventually a CM Punk Kenny Omega match, eventually the Danielson and Kenny Omega once again. Those are big mega matches. Danielson and Kenny Omega and CM Punk. Those are big mega matches for them. However, do they need... And let me rephrase the question. Do they need a guy like Roman? And I'm not saying Roman or the way he wrestles, the larger than life, turning it on, and that this guy is the man. Do they need that? And will they have that?
I think they will in time. I do think Kenny is probably the closest to that right now. They've got Sting for the casual fans, and Sting's still doing good stuff, man. I mean, the way he contributes is exactly what he should be doing.
Billy Gunn, man, I got to tell you.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. He is beyond impressive. This man, he's 6'5" legit. So in wrestling terms, he's 8'6". He's bigger than The Undertaker at this point. This guy is so big. He's so huge. And he's still moving great. That was the thing for me that caught me. You want to talk about stopping and say like, what is going on here? I was watching it and just like I saw it with like a glance. Just I was doing something when I was watching it. He comes out, I look at it and I go, my God, he's bigger every week. He is growing
bigger than he was in '99. Absolutely, this guy's in incredible shape.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
I was watching this with my kids, Dynamite and Rampage over the last couple of days, and when Billy Gunn was out there, I said to my 6-year-old, I'm like, did you know that guy was wrestling on TV when I wasn't much older than you were? And she's like, what? Daddy, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, he looked almost exactly the same. In fact, he's actually bigger now.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. I mean, good for him, right? Listen, at the end of the day, you need those genetics. No matter what you're doing, you need those genetics to be able to look like that. There's no protein shake I could drink in my life that'll get me to that level. And by the way, I come from a bodybuilding family. My grandfather was a pro bodybuilder, and so was my father. So I just don't have those genes. I'm svelte.
Don't sell yourself short, Andrew.
Swimmer's
the transformation of Andrew Zarian will be the next theme on Twitter.com. Hashtag.
Listen, I'm doing cool sculpting now. I bought a cool sculpting machine. I'm dying. My abs are bruised right now from this thing. I'm dying while we're doing a show here. Listen, I'm a body guy. I like it. It's impressive. I like to see these big jacked up dudes. But listen, AEW's been fantastic. Rampage this week, another great show. It's just a bad time slot.
I thought Rampage was so good. You know, the opening match and the ending match were great, and then you had that squash match right in the middle. Exactly what you need in a 1-hour
seconds.
show.
Yep, 31 seconds for Jade Cargill. Listen, who's going to complain about that? 12 and a half minutes, almost 13 minutes for Sammy Guevara and Tony Nese. Tony Nese, Long Island guy, couple miles away from me. Excited to see that he got that chance over there, and I'm hoping he does big stuff there. But FTR is fantastic. Penta's fantastic. Pac is fantastic. The finish was a little wacky, but I guess they had to get there. They couldn't do, a clean finish here. They had to do something wacky. But listen, wrestling is good. Wrestling is great. It's that there's this back and forth between the two companies, and I think that people are starting to see the line in the sand. And I keep talking about this every week. WWE is no longer wrestling. We've entered a whole new world for them.
No matter what you want out of professional wrestling, there's something out there for you. AEW is absolutely giving the hardcore fans what they want right now. WWE is catering to the casuals, and there's so many people out there available to work that we could use a third company, to be honest with you, to really rise to the top. I mean, obviously, there's companies out there, but a third company to elevate themselves a little bit. You said Impact's never going away. Who knows?
I don't know if it's going to
rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Impact. I don't know if it's Ring of Honor, obviously, because those days are ending. We're going to a break here. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Ryan Droste. That's DROSTE. And the show is at Top Rope Nation. Twitter, Instagram as well. Would love to have you guys check out the show. Andrew, thank you so much for the support as always.
Thank you. Ryan, everybody, go check him out. Top Rope Nation. We'll be back right after this. Andrew Zarian, Wrestling Observer Live. Wrestling Observer Live. Andrew Zarian here, wrapping it up on a Sunday. We got the NXT show coming up, War Games, at 8 o'clock. But at 7 o'clock, listen, our very own, Wrestling Observer's very own Denise Salcedo is going to be on the pre-show for NXT. Go check it out. Go support her. Go send them an email. Send them a fax telling them how great Denise is. Not that they accept fax anymore. Listen, next week, another big week in pro wrestling. AEW, UBS Arena here in Long Island. 1 week apart from WWE. And by the way, the ticket sales, they've really kicked their butts in these ticket sales. I'm very curious how that crowd is going to be in Long Island for AEW, because historically, we all know. Listen, I'm a kid that grew up here in Queens, New York. Nassau Coliseum was my backyard. The Madison Square Garden is my backyard, and it's night and day. Night and day when you talk about the live attendance and the people in the audience. Very much more awake and alive at the Garden compared to the Nassau Coliseum. But we got a new building, UBS Arena in Belmont. First time AEW is going to Long Island. Second time here in New York for AEW, and I expect it to be a pretty big show. As far as things that they do on that show to prepare you for Winter's coming the following week in Dallas. Also, to get you going with this fact that, you know, they did better than WWE, and I think they're going to rub it in their face a little bit here. Not that I'm encouraging it. But next week, we're going to be back on Sunday. Brian's back on Monday. I'm Andrew Zarian. You can follow me on Twitter, at Andrew Zarian. You can follow Matmen Podcast live every Thursday here on Wrestling Observer. And, of course, everywhere podcasts are available. And, guys, thank you so much for tuning in with me, hanging out with me for the last hour. We're going to be back next week, Wrestling Observer Live. See you, everybody.